All right. Hey, everyone. We are back with Veritas Live, and I'm Demetrius, your host. And in this episode, we will unravel the technical nuances of RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, and also discuss real world applications of this transformative technology with AI. And about a week ago, we shared a poll on LinkedIn about what you'd like to hear more about related to retrieval augmented generation. And guess what? RAG use cases came in at the number 1 spot. And so Ben Spickert, our community manager, will be in the chat engaging with you and facilitating all of your questions and comments. And so my favorite part of Veritas Live is seeing where you are watching from all around the world. So please type in the chat window where you are from right now. And for the moment we've all been waiting for, I'd like to introduce our special guest. And we have Drew Samuelson, Principal AI Product Manager with us right here at Veritas. Drew, how are you?
I'm doing great, Demetrius. Thanks for having me today.
Awesome, awesome. And Drew, I guess the first question is that how did you get into artificial intelligence, AI, and ML anyway?
I took a very distinctive route here. In the kind of early 2000s, early knots, I was in an entry level position at a startup and just got super obsessed with like basically new baseball analytics, right? So the Society for American Baseball Research, Sabermetrics, which some people would call Moneyball. I just became kind of obsessed with it and looking at something I'd known my entire life through a new kind of technical data oriented lens. That actually led me into baseball for a number of years, where I was a scout and consultant with the Tampa Bay Rays. And then basically I did that for about 8 years and then decided to turn back to tech and kind of start applying a lot of these analytics lessons through the lens of business intelligence. And that kind of just progressively led me further and further down the analytics path. And that progression eventually landed on AI and ML and now generative AI.
Wow, that's a little bit of an unconventional path. You sort of look like a scout. I get you have the beard thing going on there. So
Yeah, it
that,
took every ounce of energy I had to not wear not wear a hat today. So yeah.
all right, yeah. Well, you do have a hat head as well. So, but I don't think I do because I have a little bit of a peanut head, but I know I'm digressing here, but I really want to tap into your expertise. But first, before we do that, how can you or can you explain, I guess, the core concept of RAG, retrieval augmented generation, and how it differentiates from traditional generative AI models?
Yeah, sure thing. So with all generative AI, whether you're doing, video or, large language models or any kind of, AV, for today's purposes, we'll kind of restrict this down to large language models and text, right? And so if you're using any of these generative AI technologies, you more or less have three choices on how to kind of specialize them for your use cases. You can tune it, you can retrain it, or you can deploy RAG. Tuning and retraining are both very time consuming and expensive exercises. And 9 times out of 10, your organization probably does not have that talent on hand either. It's a very rare, talented subset of technicians that are capable of doing that. So the third option, RAG, is basically instead of trying to change the core of the LLM or whatever the generative AI technology is, what you're doing is you're kind of producing an additive library of information atop of it. And so it's trained on, it comes pre-trained on like a massive corpus and which is fantastic, but it's also pretty generalist, right? And so if I want to specialize it for what I need, I basically need to send it to kind of finishing school. And to do that, what I'll do is I'll stand up a database that has a bunch of information that I want it to learn and I want it to incorporate into its answers. And then it references that information. So really the RAG, acronym, super accurate, right? It's retrieving and it's augmenting generative content based on the library that you've established.
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal. And I was watching NVIDIA's little spiel yesterday. It was pretty phenomenal. I'm only halfway through it. It was about a 2 hour keynote from the CEO of NVIDIA. They're doing
Hmm.
something there, but I know I am digressing. But the technology is really increasing very, very, very fast. Um, Also, what I really want to make sure everyone hones in on is just making sure that things are super secure. Now, are there any security considerations when using RAG in addition to your LLM?
Yeah, of course. So, nowadays, as you well know, anytime we introduce any kind of complexity into our environment, we're basically creating a new attack vector. Now, that said, RAG is pretty safe to use, as long as you secure the data that is in your vector database. And what I mean by that is make sure that you have hyper curated what's in there, because anything that's in there is at risk of being a victim of data leakage, right? And so the two big considerations are prompt injection and data leakage. Data leakage with RAG can be very much mitigated, again, just by putting in content that you don't mind if it gets out in the open, right? And so for one of the use cases I'm working on right now, we have a ton of product documentation in that RAG going back, I believe, something like 10 years. But this is all publicly available product documentation. All we've done is more or less put it into a singular resource and pre-process that data to optimize it for the AI to, kind of reference and then, regurgitate or reprocess that information.
Mhm.
So yeah, you definitely want to curate everything that you have in your vector database within the RAG. And then prompt injection is much lesser of an issue with RAG. The prompt injection, for those that don't know, is more or less a bad actor trying to get the LLM to say or do something nefarious or adverse or objectionable. It's very much a real world concern. However, from a business standpoint, it's kind of akin to like a sophomore prank more than anything else.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't worry about that too much with the RAG implementation. But with all things, ensure that any curated data you have in the database is exactly what you want, and exactly something that you would be comfortable with should it leak out.
Yeah, data leakage is just the name of it sounds a little scary, right? Data leaking out of your large language model, and you're not quite sure where it's going to end up. And prompt injection is even more scarier as well because I guess you have to be sort of smart to try to fake out the LLM to put information in to get pieces of information back. And so,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the analogy is, like I don't have my tax returns in my library because I don't want people to come over and grab a
Mhm.
book off of the shelf and like see that kind of private information. And it's the same thing with RAG, right? You want to put, again, you only want to put in it what you're comfortable potentially coming out of it, and being exposed.
Okay, yeah, got it. And it looks like we have some folks watching from your neck of the woods, Seattle, Drew. And
Awesome.
also looks like Denmark is in the house and India always is watching here as well in the Bay Area in California. So we appreciate everyone watching as well. Please go ahead and type in the chat window your questions. Don't be afraid to do that. And Drew, I also want to see if you can maybe share any of your success stories or maybe even a case study or two where RAG has been effectively implemented, especially like in the healthcare industry, finance, or even customer service.
Yeah, so all three of those are wonderful industries for RAG because they feature such a high degree of specialization. Another one I would throw into there is actually law as well.
Oh,
A lot of law firms are having great success with RAG, especially in terms of externally with potential customers seeking legal advice, and internally, it kind of supercharges law clerks and paralegals, especially those that are kind of 0 to 4 years experience, and then like it really kind of supercharges their ability, and has been proven economically to kind of push them further down the path of productivity much quicker, right? So think of it as like expedited upskilling, and then for people that have been around a few years, it's not necessarily adding any kind of new abilities to their toolbox, but what it is doing is it's accelerating their productivity by really doing a lot of the work for them. They know what they want to do, and they ask the machine to do it, and the machine does it twice as fast as they would be able to otherwise. So yeah, finance, healthcare, and law are all excellent use cases because of the high degree of specialization in the content and context, where we're seeing a lot of real quick wins. The proverbial low hanging fruit is customer service. Customer service is typically an industry that has a high onboarding cost. It also has high upskilling costs, and it has sky high turnover. I worked on a use case in customer service recently where I believe the turnover, like the average, like the median tenure there was under 16 months. It was like 15 months or something like that. And then there's the additional burden of knowledge article reference, as well as the subsequent documentation of these tickets and cases, right? And so if you have an LLM that's enabled with RAG, not only can that LLM summarize the cases, thereby taking that burden off of the human operator and allowing that human operator to do something more valuable, but additionally, it will find the knowledge article you need lickety split, right? And so you don't have to kind of go fumbling through a library on your own. Rather, the computer just tells you, hey, this is exactly what you're talking about. And comparatively and relative, there's a comparison and relativity aspect to that as well, where it will bring you additional content that may be relevant to that particular inquiry. So yeah, we've seen, typically speaking, you can kind of expect like a 35 to maybe 40% increase in OpEx with customer service deployments, but I have seen a couple of cases where it's well over 50. And so, an LLM, a RAG-enabled LLM, can be cutting literally more than half of your OpEx in the customer service space.
Yeah, and I guess reducing the stress of some of your customer service or customer success engineers is also key and critical as well, because it's a high stress job where you are trying to, have intelligent conversations and provide a solution for your customers that they're dealing with, in some cases with your products. And generative AI and also AI is just going to be one of those, really quick and prompt ways to get information back to your customers as well. And so I want to tap into also your expertise, Drew, around maybe some of the biggest challenges. I know we talked about data leakage and prompt injection as well, and also maybe some of the limitations that are currently facing the deployment of RAG technology,
Mm-hmm.
and also maybe how are researchers and developers addressing some of these issues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the vast majority of people that want to implement RAG they're doing so because they're accepting the fact that the LLM itself is a black box to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've already chosen not to train, you've already chosen not to retune. You just want to get that additive advantage by, for lack of a better term, kind of educating your LLM. So really what you have to focus on is the things you can control, right? Because setting up a RAG is not the easiest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of very complicated technological components to this, right? And so let's just go down the pipeline real fast.
Yeah, let's
Number
do
one,
it.
you have to have your data source, right? And in the analogy I love to use is this is your F1 race team, right? You can't just shove raw crude into your sports car's engine. You have to refine the data, or the fuel in this case, and put 99 octane through there if you want to get the best results out of your engine, right?
Yeah.
So once you get the data going, you definitely have to kind of pre-process it before it goes into the vectorized database. This is kind of an imperfect simplification, but if we're talking about vectorized databases and you don't really understand what that is, you can think of it is kind of a three-dimensional space, right? Where if we're talking through the lens of language, every word gets assigned an X, Y, and Z coordinate in this space, and you essentially lay all known language in a vector based on tons and tons and tons of data that has been ingested by the LLM. Now, real vector databases measure on much more than 3 dimensions, but this is just kind of to wrap your head around the concept, right? And so you have to establish a vector database. You need embedding Embedding typically comes from the LLM manufacturer, but in some cases it doesn't. And in some cases, you can kind of customize that yourself if you feel so empowered. You definitely need some natural language understanding, and that is to discern the intent or inference of your command or query. So that's a fancy way of saying we need to know what a person is asking in order to answer it. And then beyond that, you need a search, right? You need to be able to search that vector database to recall what you need out of it. And so these are all very intricate components that operate together to produce the kind of baseline answers. And then beyond that, we haven't even touched on monitoring and observability, or feedback loop or potential reinforcement learning opportunities, and all the integrations that have to go on, right? Like all the API calls you want to be making and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it is a very massive undertaking, and it is complex. There are a lot of larger components, things like LangChain, things like Pinecone, that can kind of help accelerate that or expedite that. But at the end of the day, it is a pretty complex undertaking to fire the whole thing up.
Yeah, it looks pretty difficult, but I'm sure that you're going to hire some really smart individuals like yourself in order to help you deploy those types of functionality. And it looks like also as well we have a question that came in from the audience. So Drew, are
Sweet.
you ready? All right, let's
Yeah,
see.
ready as I'll ever be. Yeah, let's go.
Can you explain what a feature store is and how it enhances the data within RAG?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about it, and again, I'm going to go kind of executive summary simplification here, but if you think about the vector database as a library, like I called it before, the feature store is more okay, so if you've got a curated library in your house, the feature store is more like a newsstand on the corner. And again, this is kind of a simplification, but you can kind of think of it as static versus active, right? So I have a static curated library. I also have my newsstand where all the content is changing overnight, or faster. And so like a lot of applications where you'll see a feature store, going back to your question earlier, Demetrius, like finance is a great one, right? If I had a finance use case in my RAG, I might have a bunch of historic data for a proprietary investment product that we've made for years and years and years. In my feature store, I will have things like near real time market conditions, that kind of thing, and then combine the two of those together. So the LLM is making kind of the best of both the static, or in this case, historic information, and the active information that's coming in real time or near real time.
Now, is that sitting in the same repository or is that some type of
There's
yeah.
separate repositories. Yeah, feature stores typically are pulling via like an API. So in the case with like the market, like I would be pulling live market feed from somewhere else, and I would also have my curated database that would have all the proprietary information in it.
Okay, okay. Wow, look at that. We have a lively bunch in the chat. Another question. Edward said, does it mean that RAG enhances the reliability of AI's output? And he also says, as in causing less AI hallucination and adding to a more trustworthy and reliable AI output. Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a good one. So the very short answer, the TLDR, is it depends. But the longer answer is no. RAGs will still hallucinate, and there are some different approaches and methodologies you can take to kind of mitigate that to some degree. But it is entirely possible that your RAG might hallucinate. Yes.
Mhm.
What we found is, typically speaking, and again, I'm going with very, very general terms here. Typically speaking, if you add more and more and more data, the hallucination problem goes down, right? Hallucinations when you're using RAG are oftentimes the byproduct of having maybe only a handful of documents. So let's say we're looking at a customer service use case, and you're using version 12.2.2 of whatever software product. If that RAG only has a handful of documents that are pertinent to 12.2.2, the chances of it hallucinating shoot through the roof. If it has a very broad-based library, let's say if this is a customer service use case, let's say it has like product documentation, let's say it has all sorts of information from your support organization, any kind of tickets or cases that are relevant to this version 12.2.2. If you start rounding out the knowledge base that it has access to, the propensity for hallucinations go way down. Yeah, and there's a couple other approaches that are new. There's one just out of Cornell, maybe 2 months ago. It's brand new. It's corrective RAG, otherwise known as CRAG, so CRAG. We're really excited about this. The best way to explain it, I think, Demetrius, is it's kind of like having an editor within your RAG, right? And so the way that CRAG works, really on a very basic level, you have the input, right? So I make a query or a command to the LLM and the RAG. The LLM and the RAG produces a response and brings that response back. The CRAG is the editor, basically looks at that input and that output, decomposes it, recomposes it, checks it against basically the entire library, right? And then it can also check it against any kind of like scripting you may do, if you want to kind of like steer the response a little bit, and it comes back with a more refined answer. And so CRAG is a technology I'm particularly excited about,
Right.
because it's meant to kind of smooth some of these edges in terms of that retrieval and of course hallucinations as well.
Wow, this is fascinating information, Drew, and I am definitely learning a lot here, and we are talking about a lot of acronyms as well. And I don't know why we keep doing that in technology. It's acronym after acronym, RAG, CRAG, and okay, but I
You
digress.
gotta have your own tribal speak, man. Gotta, that's how it
Yeah,
goes.
I
Gotta,
see. I see. And
yeah.
let's begin to wrap up here. Any closing remarks from you around RAG or even CRAG as well?
No, I think it, like anything else, I think it has a lot of promise. It's really exciting. We're in very, very early days. If I had any kind of like unsolicited advice for anyone out there,
Mhm.
I've been really kind of banging the drum on avoiding vendor lock-in. Right now, I think my personal feelings on this space is like the degree of nascency combined with how much investment is happening in the generative AI space. There's so much dust to settle, and so we're particularly trying to stay very nimble and very adaptive. And things like CRAG popped up maybe 2 months ago as an approach or methodology, and so no one really knows what tomorrow will bring. Every day is day one, as my old boss likes to say, and definitely make sure you're staying adaptive and nimble out there with this new nascent technology.
All right, Drew. And I really appreciate the time that you spent enlightening us around RAG and CRAG and just overall around retrieval augmented generation. And everyone out there watching, be sure to check out Varun Grover, who is one of our own here at Veritas. He has a blog out there on retrieval augmented generation where he gives a brief overview of RAG and also how it enhances LLMs as well. And he also has a YouTube playlist as well, where you can also explore AI and all of these concepts in an easy to consume format. So be sure to check that out. And if you'd like to gain a deeper understanding, you can also check out a paper that Drew mentioned as well. It's a research paper on CRAG, which stands for Corrective Retrieval Augmented Generation, which improves the robustness of generation. So don't forget, everyone, World Backup Day is on Sunday, March the 31st. So be sure to celebrate by taking extra precautions to safeguard all of your digital treasures like photos and documents and email. So thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to stay secure and back up often.